What is up, Waffle Gang? I do hope you are well. My name is Mark, and today we're covering some r/pro revenge. If you'd like to skip the initial waffle, timestamps are in the description and along the timeline below, but if you are new here, please consider hitting that like, that subscribe, and maybe that notification bell too. Now, just a huge thank you to each and every one of you for taking the time out of your days to be here. It really does mean the world. I thought we'd cover some revenge stories because it's been a long time since we've done that. So let's just get involved. Much love, guys. Now, our first story is from E is for Elbow Smash. Mess with my Christmas? Pardon me as I ruin yours. I posted this in r/entitled parents, and it was suggested that you might enjoy it here. I have edited it to slightly comply with Rule 11 for the sub. This slow burn starts a full year and a half before my plan came into effect. Earlier in the year, my dad quite sensibly suggested that with the size of our Christmas party, we skip a generation with gifts to ease the financial strain as the extended family grew. At the time, I was struggling with my business and athletic career, and my wife, then girlfriend, was working on her second master's degree, so I suggested names from a hat, but he wanted to spoil all his grandchildren. I said fair enough, I'll chip in for Omar's cruise and buy gifts for my step-siblings, but don't expect anything grand. Dramatis personae for the Christmas party. Me, 28-year-old, at the time, heavyweight mixed martial artist and strength coach, aka small-time athlete working a day job to barely make rent in addition to training full-time. Martha, stepsister, 40-ish, an aging mombi, whose only assets are starting to sag too much for them to be assets anymore, leaving her with no other definable personality traits. Jane, my oldest niece, 12, stepsister's daughter. Imagine the most vapid teenager stereotype you can and multiply it by 1000. Tim, my oldest nephew, 9, stepsister's son, living proof that you're never too young to be an asshole. And Robert, stepbrother, 36, formerly cool dude who gave up on life when his kids were born. Years later, would gain back enough willpower and gumption to physically assault his wife. Tammy, 6 bro's daughter, sweet and shy girl, terrified by my mere presence, the wisest of the bunch in my honest opinion. Bubba, 7 bro's son, a generally nice kid who at this time was partway into evolving into an arsehole after being constantly told to look up to and emulate Thing 2. Tammy has brought a Nintendo DS and all the kids are struggling to see/play it together, so I foolishly offered to loan them mine to lighten the load. Tammy agrees to share with Jane and Bubba agrees to share with Tim. Having stupidly deprived myself of my means to escape social obligations, I go to the living room to acquire that much older cure for not wanting to deal with other people: alcohol. Not even having the time to pour a dram, my trained ear picks up from the kids' room the unmistakable sound of one human being pummeled by another. I politely suggest to Robert that he might want to go and have a look, but bro hasn't given 2 shits about anything in about 7 years, so he waves it off and I go to investigate. I walk in to see that Tim may be an arsehole, but is not untalented, and is managing to strike, shove into a wall and kick Bubba all at the same time, while attempting to play DS with his other hand, having decided his turn began the moment I left the room. Jane has simply wrested the DS from Tammy, who is now sitting in the corner crying. I shout for Martha, informing her that if she doesn't get in here to break things up before I count to 10, I would have a stern conversation with them. She turns up and separates the kids, and I retrieve my DS. Instead of giving Tim a lesson on sharing and not hitting people, she proceeds to berate Bubba, the kid who was being beaten, for not simply giving up the DS to a little piece of shit and making her son look bad. Jane simply lets out a tweenage sigh for the ages and tosses the other DS into the crying Tammy. I then excuse myself from the party, thanking whatever god may be that I don't have to provide gifts for any of those little shits. 6 months later, my firm belief in atheism is confirmed as bro calls me and this conversation ensues. And Robert says, "Hey Elbow Smash, while I really appreciate the gifts last year, you should really get something for the kids this year instead. Christmas is all about the children after all." I say, no, I turn up to chat with you and Dad and Omar. I really don't give 2 shits about the kids. Robert then replies, "That's a mean thing to say about the kids. Don't you care about them?" And I reply, "You cared about them so much at the last party, you couldn't be bothered to break up a fight where your son was being beaten bloody." And Robert replies, "Tim is a good kid. Martha said he just had a bad day. He was literally beating your child. You didn't put pics on social media for a week because of the bruises." If Tim were an adult and had that kind of bad day, I'd have a stern conversation with him and convinced him peacefully to lay on the floor until the police arrived. Well, stepsis and I were talking and we think you should buy stuff for the kids next year instead of us. I say, well, I'm happy not to buy you anything, but I'm not getting crap for Martha's little shits, especially when she encourages that behaviour. Robert then replies again saying, well, if you aren't going to get something for all the kids, you shouldn't get anything at all. It's not right you don't treat them equally. And I say, done. Now, I'm sure they wish it had been this simple, but unfortunately it wasn't, and I certainly wouldn't have written such a long-winded story if that were the payoff. Thanks for bearing with me so far, we're almost at the end. A few months later, about 2 weeks before Christmas, I get an email from my dad with links to various toys, mostly from Toys R Us, which still existed at the time. When I call him back to ask what it's all about, this conversation ensues. I say, hey, what's up? I got your email, what's that all about? And my dad replies, those are gifts for the kids for Christmas. I say, that's cool if you're getting them that. I'll see them when they open them up. And dad says, no, that's for you to get them. I don't buy for that generation, remember, and I already sent you my contribution to Omar's cruise. Dad replies, you need to get stuff for the kids. Don't you want them to look up to you as an uncle? I say, not really. Also, what part of my life suggests to you that they ought to look up to me as any sort of role model? You'll be better off telling them to grow up to be rock stars. Dad says, not the point. Christmas is about the children. If you don't get them this stuff, I won't put your name on the card for Omar. To which I reply, that's a really shitty thing to do, considering I already paid into that. Dad says, will you get the stuff or not? And I say, well, I guess my name isn't going on the card then. This will cost me more than a month's rent, so you can take this list and grease it up real nice. Dad interrupted me saying, calm your jets, this is what they want. And I say, I'll get them a token something, but I'm not taking out a loan. Fine, just make it something they enjoy. And I say, if what I get doesn't put a giant smile on each one of their faces, I'll buy you dinner at a steakhouse of your choosing. And Dad says, that's the spirit, I'll talk to you later. So Christmas rolls around and my wife and I have bought not just one, but 4 gifts for each of the little ones and wrapped them up all beautifully. My dad correctly assumes it's probably all from the dollar store, but it's nicely wrapped and gives them a look of approval as I place it under the tree. My wife and I schmooze for a bit and then suggest that since we brought several gifts for each of the kids, why don't they open up one each before dinner so they have something to do while they wait. Their parents of course agrees, as it gives them more of a reason to ignore their kids and talk about them instead. So they send us off to hand out gifts for their kids. Martha is looking especially smug. As they begin to unwrap them, I prepare the camera as my wife goes for our coats, and I stick around just long enough to immortalise on film the big shit-eating grin on each of the kids' faces as they see what their gifts is. Less than 1 minute later, the first blast from the air horn, Tim's gift, can be heard in the hallway clearly, as my wife and I make our way to the elevator. I have no idea how much of the bulk pack of silly string, Tammy's gift, or the 36 rainbow pack of off-brand Sharpies, Bubba's gift, ended up on the walls, but I do know they repainted the place next month. Whether or not the pile of slap-on bracelets we got for Jane ended up on the wrists and legs of the parents as they tried to contain the other 3 will be left to the imagination, but I like to think they all ended up in the heights of 80s fashion before Boxing Day. I may never know if they opened up the rest of their presents. Everyone got a copy of each of the other's gifts, for fairness, plus a bunch of other gross and mildly inappropriate temporary tattoos. In the confusion, none of them noticed either me or my wife leaving. I'm certain at some point they noticed the pretty gold envelope addressed to the parents on the tree. Inside was a pretty card, blank, but for the following note. This was a warning shot from the top of my head. I've got a whole year to get creative for next time. Merry Christmas, E. I never bought anyone steak dinner, however I enjoyed several more Christmases with Omar and Dad until they passed and I stopped seeing that side of the family at all. No mention of this incident or gifts for the kids was ever made again. And what a great example of pro-revenge. If you're going to get revenge on someone and you wait a whole year for it, that is just a beautiful way of doing it. I would have loved to see a kid's face opening up an air horn and then... But Team DNA says, as a mum, I can confirm this was the perfect revenge and kind of genius, to be honest. Excuse me while I go and buy some harmonicas from my arsehole brother's kids this Christmas. And Met One says, at the dollar store or other places you can get large quantities of tiny Barbie accessories, mass quantities of tiny shoes and handbags. This is a good alternative. Those things get everywhere. And Radar Lake says, this is a perfect example of pro-revenge. Well done. My hat's off to you. And thanks for the ideas. See, It's Me says, glad you gave your step-siblings a taste of their own medicine. Most important that you put your hard-earned money where it counts. How did your Omar like the cruise? And OP replied she loved it if memory serves. We all have been pitching in together to get her mini vacations each year for Christmas, as she was retired and otherwise didn't leave the house much. I think that year it was some sort of gimmicky one where there were D-list/retired celebrities as dance hosts on one of the nights. Now, let's move to the next story. And our next story comes from The Hunter. I'm willing to pay, let them eat semen cake. So I'm a 17-year-old web dev who can make basic websites and stuff to earn money for video games. That job's pretty easy for the pay. I get picked by some local bakery so people could pre-order cakes and stuff online. Took a few hours to puke out a functional backend and a day to make it all pretty. Thanks, Bootstrap. I agreed for 700 rupees, I assume, basically $10, which is insanely cheap even for India. But all I need is video game money, so I'm good with that. When I'm done with the job, they needed to purchase the domains and server, which I explicitly told them, you pay me 10 and use the other 10 to buy domain and 5 to rent servers, total is $25. They gave me $15 so I could set up their stuff. Once the website was fully operational, I asked for my money. But apparently they didn't want to pay because I wasn't hosting the server anyways, why do I need compensation? You know, because apparently time has no value. The thing was, I could still access the server, as I had the credentials for the server, so I go home, log in, and make one tiny change. The way the website works is there a customer page which shows your orders, and there's a page for the store owners to see the orders, payments, etc. Here's what I did. Added a small inconspicuous may contain semen warnings in all product details. In the page where it shows your order confirmations to the customer, some options are changed with semen, so like semen frosting, one by random. The website went down in about a week, and they're back selling on Facebook, lol. Guessing someone complained or something. Think of a customer right now sitting there browsing that website and seeing, may contain semen. Hold up a sec. But JB2Head says, when I read the title, I assumed you deliver a cake to be eaten, vis-a-vis the help ship pie style, but this is a lot more palatable. Well done. Guck and Buck says, this is way better than I was expecting. This is hilarious and it serves them right. Working Squid says, good for you. Unfortunately, probably not pro because you didn't get anything and they were mildly inconvenienced. For the future, try to get something like this in writing, i.e. legal contract, because the people who aren't going to pay you for the work will have less recourse to not pay you. Also, think better of yourself. A website is worth more in dev time than $10. And our next story comes from Chicken Fashion Show. I did to my neighbour what they did to others. To start, I bought a house with the intention of doing a flip. When I moved in, the self-appointed block captain let me know that they were there the first day. Sadly, they were my next door neighbours. I tried to be friendly, but listening to them, I realised how horrible they were and tried to keep it civil. My significant other kept saying, just wait for it to be our turn. They bragged about through their contracts with the city forcing people to make improvements on their houses, getting undesirable renters out of the houses and just harassing people in general. As I worked on flipping my house, the wife became a worse thorn in my side. To start, she demanded I put up a fence so people would quit cutting through my yard and scaring her. Then her and the husband demanded I take care of the weeds in the yard or they will do it and bill me. After that storm, a tree scraped their shingles and they asked for $1,200 to replace them. The tree was there before I moved in, and by code they are responsible to cut back the branches to the property line. When I wouldn't pay, they had a relative jump my fence and cut the trees down. Needless to say, I began to ignore them, so she became a constant gnat and moved on to another target. Then one day, as I was tearing down my deck for a patio, I realised she put a feral cat colony on a section of my property. I'd wondered why all the stray cats were around and I finally found out. I reached out to the city and demanded it be removed, but they said she followed the law on getting it in place. As I tried to get it shut down, she began unhinged behaviour, from standing in a window staring at me, yelling out the window at me, to hitting the fence with items to scare my dog. Here my revenge started. I started by filing a HRO, harassment restraining order, against the wife and had it granted ex parte with the evidence I provided. Of course she contested, as it was defamatory to her character. Before the hearing, the husband tried to physically intimidate me, so I filed one against him and it was also granted ex parte. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. In the hearing it came up, and there was an HRO against the husband as well. They dogged being served until I had it published as a means of service. I started to make complaints about them and their house. Also, I made police calls when necessary, as I did the other neighbours began to realise they could do to them what they had done to them and others. For example, as I was having my front door replaced, needing a building work permit, I knew they were doing internal remodelling, so I called a city inspector, and they were fined for not having a permit. As she ranted at the inspector, he looked at my window and saw I had mine displayed. The back porch became hoarded, so I made another call to the city inspector, and they had to clear it out. Then they had a broken window on the porch door, so I called an inspector and they had to replace the door. Next, the paint on their house was peeling, so I called an inspector and they had to repaint. The inspector also found the wood underneath was rotted where their front porch was sloping, so they needed to fix the front porch, sections of wood and repaint. Through all this, they had cameras put up to prove they were not doing the things I said, i.e. hitting the fence. They also pointed the camera at my backyard. As it was legal to point a camera into my yard, and a part of my HRO was her intrusive watching behaviours, I gave the camera the middle finger on my way to and from my garage. When she complained, with the city tiring of her, their response was she was admitting to intrusively watching me. The fight over the cat colony came to an end when I realised one of the cats had a serious disease and I began to capture them and turn them into animal control. Don't worry, animal control was part of the feral cat program, so they would not be put down, but their neighbour would have to pay a fine to get each cat out or have the colony closed. Finally, I caught the sick one and it had rabies. Part of the program was for her to capture each new cat and have it vaccinated, something she admitted to willing not doing on her GoFundMe for the colony. I soon had the GoFundMe shut down when I provided the evidence she was not using the funds as she stated they were going to be used. The city now had to act to close the colony. The person at Animal Control who wouldn't respond to my complaints was fired. The neighbours called in a city mediator, who we met with, presented all the evidence and said we would not meet with them, and provided extremely racist tweets they made about neighbours. The city cut ties with them as community leaders. With their powers to bully gone, and having spent what I can only imagine in fines and repairs, like they did to numerous other neighbours, after 14 years they sold their house and moved out. Way out to the suburbs, where they only have one neighbour out 50 yards away. They knew I was wrapping up my flip and would be out in less than a year. Without being able to bully their neighbours, with people having their back, they seemed to have no further reason to stay. Needless to say, I did several more things to wear them down. Finally, when I listed my house, it was sold while theirs was still on the market. As a final FU to them, I reported to the county that they had both the new and old house listed as their homestead, meaning they were paying less in property taxes, so got hit in with more fines on my way out. Wow, that guy really hated those neighbours, and I'm glad he got that revenge on them. People deserve that sort of stuff, you know. If you're going to do that to your neighbours, expect it in return, especially if your place isn't pristine, right? Previously, when we read about like HOA stories, and it's kind of that sort of behaviour, right? But what's the whole thing about cat colonies, about having a cat colony? What is that about? I didn't quite understand that part. But Marshall Mello says, you flip the house, you flip them off, and you flip the tables on them. What didn't you flip? And Cool Jesse says, cut down your trees. Where are all the amateur tree lawyers at? And the Sponge Brain says, this ticks every box on the how to legally fuck with public nuisance neighbour, and I love it. And Dun Scutch says, curious in how someone can put a colony of stray cats somewhere like that. And Demon Wolfmaster says you basically adopt a colony and move them to somewhere near your location, so they can be fed and kept warm and safe while still living outside. Since many are too feral to be moved inside safely, your job then becomes make sure all are fixed, all kittens are taken into foster, any new cats that may join are checked and fixed as well. Make sure you have proper care and warm housing for them to go in bad weather. A lot goes into it, but basically you adopt a crap ton of outside feral cats and become their caregiver. Wow, I didn't even know that was a thing, that's crazy. And Massage says, you described my next door neighbour to a T. The block captain did all the same things and fucked with people for no reason. Ex-cop mentality, and guess what? I slapped up cameras all over the house, only 2 were real, and the bullshit stopped immediately. New chick moved in next door and started right out the gate with blocking my driveway with a bumper of her car. Tried to be nice, but nope, she got ghetto with me and I pointed to the camera and the shit stopped with her too. Now I do love nightmare neighbour stories. I wish there was far more of them. I do love how petty things can get sometimes. Have you guys ever had a nightmare neighbour before? Let me know about it in the comments below. Now once again guys, I hope you have enjoyed something a little bit different, a bit of pro revenge. It's been a long time since we covered it. The stories don't come up very often. But if you did enjoy this, please let me know in the comments below and I'll try to get some more up for you too. And I will see you in the next one. Take care guys. Much love.